guys, this is Techimi. So for this video, we will be implementing the viewing of permissions feature for our custom property rental management software. So without further ado, let's start. Okay, so first off, let's go to the backend implementation for the web API. So basically here we do have the permissions controller with the base URL of the API slash v1 slash permissions. And then we will be basically using this endpoint here with the method name of get permissions async with a parameter of long ID, to which we will see here in the route that this ID will be referring to the company ID. And we will be basically returning the list of get permissions model for this endpoint, and then we will be also passing the ID to the get permissions query like here. Okay, so for the query, we have this payload of um, CID or the company ID, and then we do have the response of get permissions model, which contains the fields or properties for the ID of the permission and then the name. And then for the implementation, so we have here the get permissions query handler having the get permissions query and then the response of list get permissions model. So for the logic implementation, so what we do have here is um, like the basically like the previous implementations for the feature. So what I did was um, validated the company first if it's existing or not. So here, so if the company is not existing, so basically the backend will return the um, status code of 400 and then with a message of company not found. But otherwise, if the company is valid or existing, so basically we will be getting the company permissions here, passing the company ID, and for and for this one here, so we're just simply pass the we simply did pass the company ID to the get company permissions within um the repository, and then we called a stored procedure of USP underscore get company permissions, and the implementation for that one is this one here, database programmability, so procedure. So that's the get company permissions. So get company permissions of this one here. So basically what we did was just to select the ID and then the name from the permissions table, and then according to the company ID. So this is the SQL query for that procedure. And then going back here, we've assigned the permissions with a list of get permissions model, and then here we we tried to validate if the permissions that count is greater than zero. So basically we do have permissions added for that company, so it will return the permissions with a success of true and then a status code of OK or 200 and a message of permissions retrieved, and then we have no errors for the message. But otherwise, if there is something wrong or if there's a error that has occurred, so basically um, this message here will be returned but instead having a result of null and then a success value of false and then a 400 bad requests and then a message saying no permissions found. So basically, this is the implementation for the get permissions feature. So um, let us try to use Postman to test this one just to make sure that the implementation is working. So let me just build this and then I'll run it. Let's just wait for it. Okay, so now we have the backend API running. So let's go to Postman. So basically, let's try to log in first using the test1 admin user so that we can get the token. So this one here, status variable to access token. And for this one here, we need to do the get permissions profile and basically for the request just what like I've mentioned in the previous videos like for the header. So basically we needed to pass the authorization, the UID, the permission name, and then the CID for the request to work and validate if it's and validate whether the company or the user ID passed is valid, but otherwise we won't be have but otherwise we will be having a invalid requests. Okay, so for this one here, let us try to get um the permissions for the company ID of this one here. So let's try to send this. Okay, so for this request, we have validated that the logic that we have within our backend is working since we see here that it um, successfully returned the permissions that we needed. And whenever we try to pass the invalid ID, let's say here, and we try to send it. So basically, as we can see, the result was null, and the success value is false, and the status code is 400 with a empty message, and then the error of company not found. So basically, now we have tested and proved that the bucket logic is working. So the next thing that we will do is to integrate this with the front end, which is the ASP.NET Core MVC front end. So let's just close this things for now. And then we go to the, let's just close this account, this one here, and we go to the areas where we have the permissions, this one here, and then we go to the views to check like this one here, list, and I think we do have the integration, which is this one here, the permissions. There you go. Okay, so for this one here, so basically for the list here, let me just quickly reposition the file. So basically for this one here, we do have the list.cshtml resource file, which is in the area of the accounts views permissions like this one here. And then so basically for this part here, we notice that we use the get uh, the list of get permissions model, which is the same model that we have within our web API. And then here we have this table of basically just to display the company permissions within the table. And then we also have the permissions controller here for the MVC part. So as what you can see here, we have the area, the accounts, and then we have this public I action result of list. which basically refers to this view here. And then for here, we notice that we get the value from the session, which is the CID or the company ID, and then the user ID, and then also the token, and then pass this parameters or variables as parameters within the permissions service file within the method of get company permissions, which is this one here. So for this one here, the implementation for that one is this one here. So we are now in the I permission service.cs. As let me just okay, yeah. So here we do have the get company permissions async method definition where we have the parameters of company ID, the user ID, and the token. And then here we did the pass the headers for the authorization for the token, and then the CID or the company ID, and then the UID or the user ID, and then the permission name, which is the permissions that can view list. So basically, this part here is similar to what we did in Postman, which is like this one here. So going back, so here next would be we created a or we did have a or rather we did a get request using the HTTP client to the web API endpoint of the API v1 permissions company ID, which is like this one here. And then upon sending the request, we handle the status code of here. So basically, if the status code is 200, which is basically letting us know that the server or the handshake rather was acknowledged by the server. And then for this logic here, we re- uh, we basically just read the content string from the response, and then we try to get the response here via the deserializing the JSON text here from JSON string to a strongly typed model here, which is the list of get permissions model. So here, um, since like what we did with our previous integrations, since we did return a custom errors from the web API, so this is where we handle it. So here we do have a um, response view model of list string, which will be holding the response of errors if there are any. So basically this one here, the response error dot success, and then the value for from the response. Same goes with the status code and the errors. So here, if the response is not successful and then the status code is bad request, so what we did here was to return a null for the value for the permissions and then the response errors, which is this one here. But if the response is successful and then the status code is okay or 200, so this part here returns the um the actual API response, which contains the actual permissions that the company has. And then for the errors, we did just put here null. So after that, if this part here is not successful or contains errors, so what we do have here is to read the uh, the error um, context string and then map it to the list string, since we are just trying to parse the error strings from the backend, and then basically just return the null for the permissions here and then the errors. So after that, going back here within the controller. So basically, what we did here now was just to basically return the view, which is this one here. And then we also pass the permissions and specifically the result. So let's try to run this and see what will be the output. Okay, let's just wait for it to load. Okay, so now that we have this one here, so we just need to log in. Okay, so we go to the permissions list. So basically, as what you can see, we can now retrieve and display the company permissions from the database and then display it in the WebMVC project. So now you can see that we do have the company permissions of property can add, can view list, can view rent history, can edit, can add tour. And then for the permissions, same, can add, can view list, can delete, can assign. For the users, we do have can add, can view list, can view, can delete, and then for the renter and other permissions, so we do have this can view billing statements, can add, can edit, can view, can delete. So for example, let's try to add a new permission. So basically, let's just try to add a like test permission one. So whenever we click the save here, so what will happen next will be whenever that we have successfully saved the permission. So basically, it will be redirecting the page to this link here and display the company permissions. So let's try to save this. And we also hear the success notification. And then here, we we now see the test permission one displayed here along with other company permissions. So yeah, so now we can validate that both the back end and the front end are now successfully integrated. And we now see here when we tested, when we tried to test the functionality, so we were able to add and then display the added permission here. So yeah, okay, so basically, I think that's it for the implementation and then the integration for the front end and then the back end of our view permissions for the company. So I hope that you have learned something from the video and then find something interested within it. So yeah, so for the next video, um, please just stay tuned and we will still be continuing with like the other features here. So maybe the next thing that we will be implementing will be um the by adding of the employee and then the viewing of employees here, just to make sure that we do this first before we can assign a permission to the employees. So yeah, so I guess yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching the documentation, and then yeah, stay tuned. Thank you.